Near the end of August, we finally got some new people to playtest our game, and it was a bit rough. At the time, you were tasked with finding a specific guy in the forest, and you did so by sorting through items to figure out which ones belong to them, all while using a magical tattoo for directions. In testing, several problems arose. Number one, the forest was boring. You spent so much time walking around doing nothing, and there wasn't enough monsters to pose a consistent threat. Number two, the investigation mechanic felt like a misplaced 2D minigame in a 3D world. It broke immersion and clashed with the otherwise haunting tone of the forest. And number three, it simply wasn't rewarding. From the player's perspective, you had to interact with these piles of items for some reason, and then eventually, without warning, run into the guy you're looking for. Players felt like they just stumbled upon the target rather than tracking them down, and in fact, they struggled to tell the difference between success and failure in general. The paper prototype we had made was fun on its own, but with the in-game context, it felt completely disconnected. So, we've got some fundamental issues. What now? Do we try to salvage what we've got, or throw stuff out and try again? Scrapping work sucks, but sometimes you just have to read the writing on the walls. So, the old investigation system, gone. Replaced. The randomly generated forest, not so random anymore. The monsters, well, they can stay, sort of, but they need changes. They can't just wander around until the player happens to find them. We need them to pursue the player at all times. I'm Isaac.
I'm Gunnar.
I'm Preston.
And this is our horror game, For the Pit. You've been accepted into a secret society that worships a horrifying pit in the ground named Elijah. Your job is to enter a very haunted forest and find an unlucky soul so that you may keep Elijah fed. But how will you find this person? And why do the pit chanters look like this now? Well, the game's pit chanters have always looked like this. We initially decided on the no-face, eyes-only look in hopes that everyone would wonder, what are these things? Are they even human? As we've held onto this design for a while and asked some friends their thoughts, we made a discovery. The design wasn't performing as planned. Instead of being mysterious, they were just uninteresting. So we tried to gather some fresh ideas. Keep the robe and add some arms. And for the face, it sounded interesting to make these guys look like abominations, perhaps with some animalistic qualities. So through some trial and error, we landed on this, our new pit chanters. It's a very different direction, but raises a lot of new and interesting questions. We're still gonna add a few things to it, but let us know your thoughts on the new look. Now it was time to design a fresh way of tracking down your target. To start off, I wanted to add onto that investigator vibe when you're looking for your targets, so we added an interactable journal with lots of helpful info. Then I played some new games to get inspired, and definitely did, primarily from Return of the Obra Dinn, Phasmophobia, and its steals. So what if instead of sorting through items, you sort through people? You'd start the mission with info about the person you're looking for, and have to figure out which of the several dudes in the forest matches up. But how do we learn about these several dudes? It seemed like the most practical route was to interrogate them, but that didn't really sound scary, so instead you possess them, forcing them to give up the answers, then compare that info with what you're looking for and cross out names until you've got the perfect person. We whipped up a prototype and now let's playtest.
Wow. Wow. It's actually quite bad.
Okay, it didn't go that bad. The game was better, but just bland. Players almost immediately learned every question and answer, which made it boring quick. To make this interrogation mechanic work and be unique every time, we'd need an extremely complex dialogue tree of seemingly endless options. And while the mechanic truly wasn't bad, it wasn't strong enough to justify the workload. So we scrapped it, and I honestly felt at a low here because it seemed like we were destined to make a mediocre game. I spent a week banging my head against the wall until finally some inspiration struck. This time, the target's dead from the start, so we're just trying to find the body instead. The player gets a map of the forest, and they're told that the body they're looking for is in one of these 36 spaces. They just need to figure out which one. On the map are these random landmarks, and the player can perform a different ritual at each of them. These rituals will tell the player where the body is not. Because the 2D sections were negatively received before, let's have the player do all the work in 3D space. They'll set up things like candles, chalk, and turn off lights to get answers. As an example, in the cabin, the player will place down candles, outline them with chalk, and light them up. 2 candles will be blown out and signify a quadrant of the map where the body won't be found. Or there's also this ritual at the radio tower where after placing some chalk, you'll get a call listing off coordinates that can be safely crossed out. It's all kind of like a giant game of Battleship. You'll keep doing this until you've only got one space left. The new system was promising, but to tie it all together, we needed a persistent threat, something like Slenderman or the Xenomorph. We needed a nemesis. We decided that at the start of every mission, one nemesis would be selected at random. Each one is a monster mechanically different from the last, and these monsters take advantage of your expectations. They're unpredictable, and if you want any chance at surviving, you must learn how each one works. And with them in, finally, it felt like the game was coming together. A friend of mine playtested and said this was the best it's been so far. Thanks to the Nemesis, it was far more engaging than before, and the rituals felt much more organic than any previous style of investigation. It is absolutely not perfect or final. We need more playtesters, more monsters, and more variety, but for a prototype, the test went about as well as we could have hoped. Whew! This game dev stuff sure is complicated. How's anybody supposed to learn this? It takes a lot of skills.
Hello?
Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. When I first got into making games, I desperately wished I had a guide or someone to teach me. Skillshare makes that possible. It is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, and more. I personally am going to be taking some classes to learn more about music. Skillshare can help you take your career, skills, hobbies, or passions to the next level. When starting your learning journey, you're asked a variety of questions, so you'll be recommended classes tailored to you. Skillshare is always staying up to date, now with smarter class categories, several new class topics, and even the ability to find classes by software and material. So fans of Godot, Unity, Unreal, we're all together on this one. And on top of that... Wait, hang on. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. You serious? 500? Yeah, alright, if you're sure. Sorry about that, I was just told that the first 500 people to join Skillshare using our link get 1 month of Skillshare Premium for free. Check out the link in our description to join, and thank you, Skillshare.
I've come to realize that random generation is not always needed. If we look at Lethal Company, the planets you explore never change their exteriors. But the interiors, where you spend a majority of your time, are always different. Now imagine if the planet's exteriors were also randomized. It would needlessly complicate things, and more than likely look worse than before. What I'm saying is, if you make something generate randomly, make sure it gives it more value, and not less. I bring this up because in previous versions, we had the terrain randomly generated. Each time a level was generated, a height map was generated to determine the heights of the vertices on the ground. Due to this, and my inexperience, the terrain was fairly flat and basic, and it showed in playtests. One of our testers said, if this forest is randomly generated, I can't tell. The terrain isn't necessarily bad, but we needed to do much better. Considering the fact that the player will be playing many levels throughout their playthrough, this meant we had to change something. In our newest versions, the terrain is sculpted and blended. Thanks, Preston. Then imported into Godot, which has produced a much more interesting result. Comparing these shots, I think you would also agree. We will be using multiple terrains throughout the game, with each terrain having different layouts to keep the levels feeling fresh and giving a different experience each time. To help the levels not be visually boring, we also adjusted the visuals of the game. The first thing we changed was the lighting. Honestly, I couldn't list off everything we changed to the lighting, because Isaac and I just messed with values until we got a good result. The main changes were adjusting the ambient light and enabling SSAO, which stands for Screen Space Ambient Occlusion. It makes the light near the foliage and the trees and other objects darken towards the ground. To help sell that retro vibe, we also added a dithering effect to the camera. The main benefit of using dithering is the lighting and shadows are now more pixelated and fit in better with the vibe that we were trying to accomplish. With the use of handcrafted levels, we can now use an actual navigation mesh. Before, the enemies used raycast to detect if objects were in the way, which for the most part produced less than favorable results. I mean, technically, we could have also used a navigation mesh before, but now it is much easier to do so since the terrain is the same. I thought this would fix everything, and while it is much better, it also has its own problems. For some reason, converting the mesh to a collision can produce some funky results when combined with other objects in the scene. For example, if the player walks into either of these two spots near the bathrooms, the player becomes immobile and cannot move from the spot. Also, the new enemy AI really likes to spin. A lot. As you can see, I am not allowed to show you what the enemy looks like, so what you're seeing is recreation. Any attempt to find out what the current enemy looks like is punishable by death. Now, I will admit, this spinning seems to have been fixed. It's not in the most recent updates. But now, sometimes the AI just stands completely still for a few seconds. The spinning is funnier though, and if you combine the fact that previous iterations of AI used to do this, I see a connection. This new system has had its flaws, but I am much happier with this system compared to the previous one. It seems it is about that time.
It's been a while, and we have lots to talk about. But first, Too Close to Sun commented asking for a setup reveal, and I promised to show it if the comment reached 50 likes, and, well, yeah. So, here you go.
Alright guys, you asked for it. It's time for the setup reveal. In 3, 2, there it is. And nothing else. I'll probably zoom in. Except him. Yeah, I think I was robbed.
But alas, I wasn't robbed. I just moved back to my home state from Idaho, and likely by the time of the next devlog, I will be on my way to a new state where I will do a full setup reveal including my many trinkets and probably my cat too, despite how ugly he is. Now, onto the game itself. A big part on my end that I haven't discussed much is lowering the polygons of the models. Sounds exciting, huh? Well, actually, it's not so bad. To sum it up, Isaac also works on some of the modeling for the game, and to keep a consistent look, he'll send me models he's worked on, and I try to cut out vertices and polygons where I can, so it doesn't affect the quality and definition of the model, but still gives us that classic look we want. One of the biggest inspirations for my PS1 style is the Harry Potter games. As soon as I heard, I rushed down from my hut to give you a big congratulations. I know you'll catch the snitch first. I just know it. But in all seriousness, I am a big fan of the old Harry Potter games visuals, and I feel they capture the graphical period very well. Now, time to talk about the beauty of nature. After deciding to make the environment by hand, I was tasked with something quite new to me, level design. We wanted to sculpt terrain that was not only visually exciting, but would also lend itself to intense and memorable chases. So first, I came up with this. Yeah, nothing too special. A pretty bare-bones terrain with nothing but a few hills and a river with no spots of interest. So, back to the drawing board. After a couple of attempts, I came up with this! I call it Snake Ridge. With many more points of interest like a mysterious cave, a cliff overlooking a river, and lots of elevation variation. That was fun to say. This is only the first possible terrain though, as I have many more to make. Now that we have a world, it's time to make it more lush. We struggled for a while with how we wanted it to look. First, we tried a new tree, the aspen, which definitely helped, and is easily one of my favorite models I've made, but it wasn't enough. So, I made more details, like leaf piles, taller grass, bushes, flowers, leaves that fall, twigs that fall, more frequent grass, a hue shift to make the grass a richer green, until we finally came to this. This is easily the happiest I've been at the terrain. What was once a barren wasteland with occasional trees, now feels like a living, breathing forest. Moving on, we'll finish off with a quick fire round of some other cool stuff I made. Starting off, we have a journal, I made some candles, a little grasshopper, and a mysterious combination box that reveals.
I wanted to spend this devlog talking not just about our accomplishments, but also our failures. A freaking moron once said, making games is easy. They're wrong and they're stupid! Making games is hard. Your initial ideas might not always pan out, and that's an important lesson. Don't be so attached to every idea you come up with. Some will work, some won't. Accepting that things might need to change will only make the game better in the end. The result for us? Motivation is at an all-time high. Because we whipped up these prototypes quickly, the setback is actually teeny tiny. We've rebooted almost every aspect of the game, but at its core, it's still everything we wanted from the beginning. True to the original vision, but better. From here, we'll be building upon everything we have, gathering more feedback, and filling out the game further and further. New monsters, items, rituals, etc. If you'd like to playtest and get a bunch of other cool rewards, consider supporting our Patreon. For our $10 members, we'll have a new demo ready to go within the next 2 weeks. And if you'd like to chat with us in the meantime, check out our Discord. A huge thank you to our patrons, and a special shout out to Amalur, Icarus Softpaw, Tibbers, and WatermelonZest. Thank you all so much,
and we'll see you soon.